The courtroom was silent, except for the judge's chuckle. Darius stood stiffly in front of the bench. 16, black, hands trembling, voice barely louder than a whisper. Judge Marks leaned back in his chair, lips curled. "You call that a sentence, boy," he scoffed. "No wonder you're here." Laughter rose from the bailiff's corner. Darius's eyes dropped, but then the courtroom doors creaked open. Heels clicked. A woman in a sharp navy suit stepped inside. And just like that, the judge stopped laughing. "Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below." Darius Hayes did not talk much. He kept his headphones in and his sketch pad close, drifting through school days like mist, present but barely noticed. His eyes saw everything, though. Cracks in sidewalks, shadows under lockers, smiles that hid sharp teeth. He drew them all. Quiet pages filled with loud truths. At home, the walls were warm with love, even if the fridge was sometimes light. His mother, Dr. Lena Hayes, was a whirlwind of strength, head of a major justice reform initiative, always in motion, always giving more than she took. She kept her heels by the door and her case files on the kitchen table. Every night, she made time for Darius, even if it was just 15 minutes. She gave it to him with her whole heart. "Your voice matters," she would say, brushing his hair back like she did when he was little, even when they tried not to hear it. Darius never doubted that, until the day it was stolen from him. It started like any other after-school walk. He was heading home from a late tutoring session, hoodie up, hands in pockets, sketchpad tucked under his arm. A cruiser slowed near the corner liquor store, where shattered glass glinted like stars. Someone had thrown a brick. Sirens pulsed. And in that 1 second, Darius became the answer to a crime someone else committed. "Stop right there," the officer barked. Darius froze. "Where were you 20 minutes ago?" "School." "Then tutoring." "I have my pass." But the cop never checked. At the precinct, no one asked for his side of the story. They just stared at his skin and scribbled his name into the system, like it had always belonged there. By the time Lena's phone rang, she was 2 states away, keynoting a summit on youth incarceration. The signal cut out halfway through the call. They said it was a minor charge. A court date would be scheduled. They told her not to worry, but she worried anyway. Darius was assigned a public defender, a gray-suited man with tired eyes and a file already half forgotten. At their first meeting, he skimmed the report, nodded distractedly, and said, "We'll probably get probation if you're lucky." "But I didn't," Darius started. The man waved it off. "You do not want to fight this. Let it go, kid." Darius wanted to scream, but he just nodded. Lena's flight back was delayed due to storms. The court date moved forward by 2 days without notice. When Darius checked with the front office at school, the secretary just handed him a printed time and address. No offer to call a parent. No question why a kid like him was standing there alone. And so, that Friday morning, Darius walked into the courthouse by himself. The metal detector beeped as he passed through. He had forgotten to remove the tiny binder clip on his sketch pad. The officer waved him on without looking. Courtroom 4B was dim and tired-looking, peeling corners of paint, an air conditioner that hummed like it was gasping. The other kids sat with parents or caseworkers. Darius sat alone in the back row, eyes on his shoes, trying to remember his mother's voice. "Your voice matters. Your voice matters." His name was called. He stepped forward. Judge Ronald Marks looked up from his notes, eyes cold and unreadable. "Well," he muttered, "what have we here?" Darius cleared his throat. "Sir, I did not." "Do not interrupt me." The judge's voice cracked like thunder. "You people are always so quick to cry innocent." The room fell still. Darius tried again. "I was at tutoring. There's a sign-in sheet." Judge Marks leaned forward. "Let me guess. Some teacher just happened to back you up." He chuckled. A dry, mean sound. The bailiff smiled. The court reporter looked away. The public defender did not speak, did not stand, just stared at the floor. Darius's heart beat so loud, he thought it might burst through his chest. Marks kept going. "I see boys like you every day. Always an excuse. Always a sad story. But look where you end up. And then he laughed. Quiet, ugly, right into the microphone. Darius stood frozen. He could barely see. His palms were slick. His knees felt too thin to hold him. Then the door creaked. A hush moved through the courtroom like wind before a storm. Heels, sharp, echoing. Darius turned his head. His mother, Dr. Lena Hayes, stepped into the courtroom like it was hers. In a midnight blue suit, shoulders squared, eyes locked on the judge like a spear to the chest. Judge Marks blinked, recognition dawning, too late. Darius's breath caught. The room had not changed. But suddenly, it felt like it belonged to someone else. The courtroom did not breathe. Dr. Lena Hayes walked forward, each step cutting the silence like glass. Her heels clicked once, twice, before she stopped beside her son. Her hand brushed his shoulder, anchoring him. Her gaze never left the bench. Judge Ronald Marks shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "And you are?" he asked, voice tight. Lena did not blink. Dr. Lena Hayes, Darius's mother and his legal guardian. The words landed like thunder. Somewhere in the gallery, a pen dropped. The bailiff stiffened. "Oh," the judge murmured, feigning ignorance. "Dr. Hayes? The name sounds familiar." "You read my report last year," she replied, coolly. "The one on prosecutorial bias in juvenile courts." He gave a half-smile, but his eyes darted nervously toward the clerk's desk. "Well, this is a simple matter. Your son was—" "Falsely accused," Lena interrupted, "with no physical evidence. No eyewitness testimony. No review of the school security footage that confirms he was not within 2 blocks of the crime scene." She opened her leather folio and pulled out a stack of time-stamped images. Darius entering school, Darius at tutoring, Darius waving to his teacher as he left. All within the window of the incident. "I submitted this to the public defender's office," she added, her voice like ice over fire. "Apparently, they never reviewed it." The judge opened his mouth, but Lena was already moving, her words precise, relentless. "The arresting officer is Samuel Reeds. His record includes 5 excessive force complaints and 2 documented incidents of racial profiling, one of which you dismissed without a hearing, Judge Marks." The room shifted, like gravity had tilted. The public defender finally raised his head, eyes wide. Too late. Marks tried to smile again. "Let's not turn this into Into what?" Lena asked, stepping forward. "A mirror?" A pause stretched across the room. Darius stood silently beside her, watching her become something he had only seen glimpses of before. His mother had always been brilliant, but this was something else. Something almost holy. He was watching someone take back power word by word. The judge straightened his shoulders, reaching for control. "This is highly irregular. You were not present during—" "Because the court failed to notify me," Lena snapped. "A minor appeared without his guardian. That alone violates state procedural code. The fact that you proceeded without questioning that absence is malpractice." Someone outside the doors began murmuring. A phone camera clicked. A young woman, barely older than Darius, stood quietly at the back. A law clerk. She had filmed the judge's mocking laughter just 10 minutes earlier. Now she uploaded it. Lena continued. "I have filed an emergency injunction and a formal ethics complaint. As of this moment, Judge Marks, your courtroom is under review." The judge's face turned pale. His voice faltered. "Dr. Hayes, surely we can resolve this without escalation." "Oh, it has already escalated," she said, slowly. "You escalated at the moment you decided to laugh at my son." Darius felt heat behind his eyes, but it was not shame anymore. It was something older, deeper, something that had been waiting years to rise. The judge looked at him now, not like a criminal, but like a mirror he did not want to face. Lena placed her hand on Darius's shoulder again. "Speak," she whispered. Darius looked up. "I did not do this." His voice did not shake. "I know who I am," he said. The judge said nothing. Lena turned back to the bench. "We demand immediate dismissal of all charges and a written apology on record." Judge Marks blinked. You expect me to apologize? I expect you to do your job, she said, if you can still remember what that means. The judge stared at her for a long moment, face unreadable. Then he reached for his gavel. But before it could fall, the courtroom doors opened again. 2 reporters walked in, followed by another official, someone from the State Judicial Review Board. Lena smiled faintly. This is not just about my son anymore, she said, almost gently. It is about how many others like him have stood here, alone and been laughed at. Darius watched as the judge's hands trembled slightly, and in that trembling, he saw something he had never seen before. Fear, not his, theirs. Judge Marks shifted behind the bench, his authority slipping like dust through his fingers. The courtroom no longer moved at his pace. Eyes that once looked down now stared directly at him. The silence held its breath, waiting to see what he would do next. He cleared his throat and tried to steady himself. We will reconvene after a short recess, he said, tapping the gavel with a weak thud. But Lena was already speaking. No recess. We proceed. The judge blinked. Dr. Hayes, you do not have authority to... I have every authority, she said, cool as steel. You allowed a minor to stand trial without notice to his guardian, ignored procedural safeguards, and made degrading remarks on public record. If you believe I will let that moment pass, you have misjudged more than just my son. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. She turned toward the bench, pulled out a thin drive from her folder, and handed it to the bailiff. Security footage. School timestamp. Angle facing the front entrance. My son walked in 10 minutes before the vandalism occurred. The bailiff hesitated before passing it forward. Even his eyes had changed. Judge Marks fumbled to insert the drive into the small courtroom screen system. The footage flickered to life. It showed Darius, alone, walking into the school building. Hoodie pulled up, bag in hand, pausing to fist bump the janitor. The timestamp blinked brightly. 3:46 p.m. The incident at the storefront had occurred at 3:52. Mark stared at the screen in silence. Lena pressed on. 2 eyewitnesses from a tutoring program are prepared to testify. They signed statements already submitted to the court. Your office chose not to read them. The judge began to speak, but Lena cut him off. And let's talk about Officer Reed's. She pulled out a thick file, documenting complaints, each with a date and witness name. 5 allegations of misconduct in the last 18 months. 2 involving juveniles. 3 related to racial profiling. And every single one dismissed in your courtroom. A low murmur ran through the gallery. The law clerk in the back kept her phone low, still recording. Lena stepped closer to the bench. If this is the justice system you uphold, then I intend to break it open. Darius looked around, eyes wide. The courtroom, the place that once made him feel 2 inches tall, now felt like it was tilting in his direction. Not fully, not yet, but enough. The judge tried to reclaim the reins. Dr. Hayes, if you are here to grandstand. I am here, Lena said sharply, because a judge laughed at my son, because a courtroom of professionals stood silent while it happened, because you thought no one would come for him. She paused. Now I am here, and I am not leaving until this is made right. Outside the courtroom, the media had gathered. The leaked footage from earlier, Judge Mark smirking as he mocked Darius, was already trending. Hashtags bloomed. Hashtag justice for Darius. Hashtag Lena Hayes. Hashtag laughing judge. The door opened again. A man in a gray suit slipped inside, holding a leather briefcase. He walked directly to Lena and leaned in. Anthony Collins, he whispered. Civil Rights Division. You called. She nodded. The judge looked up, surprised. You brought counsel? I brought backup, Lena said. Collins approached the bench, pulling out a printed document. We are filing for dismissal on the grounds of procedural misconduct and violation of due process. Additionally, we are notifying the Judicial Qualifications Commission of a formal ethics violation. Judge Marks paled. Lena turned to Darius. Would you like to say anything, sweetheart? He looked at her, then at the judge. I tried to tell you, Darius said quietly. I told you I did not do it. You did not listen. You just laughed. The room was still. Darius took a breath. But she listened. My mom listens. She hears all the things you pretend not to. The judge swallowed hard. Collins stepped forward. We request an immediate ruling. Marks leaned back, face tight. His world was crumbling, and for the first time in decades, he could not stop it. He glanced at Lena again, at the news cameras flashing behind the glass, at the file of complaints that had finally found sunlight. The power was no longer in his hands. Judge Marks did not speak right away. He sat still, his fingers twitching slightly as they hovered above the file in front of him. His eyes darted to media through the glass, then to the thick pack of complaints, then back to Lena. He looked trapped. Dr. Hayes, he began, his voice brittle. While I acknowledge that there are no oversights in this case, I do not appreciate the tone. Lena tilted her head slightly, not blinking. This is not about tone. This is about how many boys like my son have walked out of your courtroom with a record and a weight they did not deserve. He hesitated. You are making this personal. She stepped forward. It is personal. You allowed my child to be criminalized because of the way he speaks, the way he walks, the color of his skin. And when he tried to defend himself, you laughed. The room went still again. Outside, the law clerk's video, his smirk, the mocking tone, the phrase you people, was spreading like wildfire. The courtroom was being broadcast to thousands now, maybe more. Lena took a breath and leaned in. Did you know that Darius's case was advanced by 2 days without notifying me? That a minor was scheduled to appear alone in front of you? That a court administrator signed off without contacting a guardian? Marks looked at the clerk. Is that true? The clerk nodded once, nervously. And the paperwork? Lena asked, her voice sharp as glass. Filed by someone who no longer works here. I spoke with her this morning. She says she was ordered to expedite cases that clogged the system. Darius was one of them. Marks tried to compose himself, but the pieces were slipping too fast now. Lena placed a final document on the bench. This is the injunction, signed by a district appeals judge. You will review it, and then you will dismiss these charges. Publicly. On record. He stared at it. And if I refuse, he said, a last flicker of arrogance behind the question. Lena smiled coldly. Then I walk out that door and hold a press conference with every parent whose child sat in this courtroom and left scarred. Judge Marks's shoulders sagged. The moment had arrived. The performance was over. There was no more power to pretend with. He picked up the document with shaking hands and began to read. While he scanned the injunction, Lena turned to the gallery. Let me tell you something about my son, she said, voice carrying. He is not a criminal. He is an artist. He sketches faces he sees on a train and gives them stories. He memorizes entire songs after hearing them once. And when someone is hurting, he notices first. Darius shifted, unsure, his cheeks flushed. Lena continued, her voice cracking. But none of that mattered here. Not to this court. Because his skin said something louder than his mouth ever could. She turned back to the judge. You thought he was invisible. You thought I was far away. You were wrong on both. Just then, the courtroom door opened again. A local reporter entered quietly, followed by a woman in a black suit, an official observer from the state's Judicial Oversight Board. She took a seat near the back, pulled out a notepad, and began writing. Marks noticed. His hand flinched. He looked down once more at the injunction. Then he exhaled. I will grant the motion, he said softly. The courtroom inhaled in one breath. The case is dismissed. The juvenile record will be sealed. No charges will be filed. Darius did not move. He barely processed the words. He only felt Lena's arm wrap around his back, her fingers gripping the fabric of his hoodie. On the record, Lena said, standing straight. Say it again. Judge Marks hesitated. The charges against Darius Hayes have been dismissed. Permanently. He looked smaller now. Hollowed. The room was not his anymore. Lena did not thank him. She just turned to her son, her eyes full of something only he could understand. Fears. Breaking relief. Darius whispered, We can go. Lena nodded. We are done here. But she was wrong. They were just getting started. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the moment stayed thick in the air. Judge Marks had retreated into chambers without another word, and the gavel had fallen. But it felt more like a surrender than a ruling. Outside, cameras flashed. Reporters swarmed the front steps. The video had gone viral. Headlines scrolled across phone screens. Judge laughs at black teen in court. Mother turns tables in stunning courtroom showdown. Lena Hayes shatters systemic silence in juvenile courtroom. But Lena had no interest in headlines. She and Darius did not leave. Instead, they walked straight into the next courtroom over, where civil proceedings were already underway. Anthony Collins, the civil rights attorney Lena had called, stood at the front with a motion in hand. "We are filing for a formal review of this court's juvenile case history under Judge Ronald Marks," he told the clerk. 52 cases in question. Patterns of disproportionate sentencing. Denial of due process. Racial bias in language and ruling. The clerk blinked. And the complainant? Lena stepped forward. All of us. By the next morning, families began arriving. Parents whose kids had once stood where Darius stood. Quiet names from forgotten files, now walking in, holding old records and broken trust in their hands. Back in the courthouse conference room, Lena sat with Darius and Collins, preparing to meet with the state commission. "Do I have to talk?" Darius asked, tracing the spiral of his sketch pad with a finger. Lena looked at him. "You do not have to, but you can." He hesitated, then slowly flipped the sketch pad open to the latest page. A drawing of Judge Marks, towering monstrous, his gavel turned to ash in his hand. Beside him, a small figure stood tall, not angry, not afraid, just present. "Oh, that is you," Lena whispered. Darius nodded. The meeting room door opened. A soft chime. The commission representative stepped in. Lena and Collins began presenting their case. Dates, transcripts, complaints that had gone ignored for too long. Charts, timelines, patterns of disparity. It was clinical, precise, devastating. Then the commissioner looked at Darius. "Would you like to speak?" she asked. Darius looked at his mother. She nodded once, gently. He stood. "My name is Darius Hayes." He began. "I am 16. I like music and drawing, and sitting at the park across from my building." He took a breath. His voice did not shake. "I got arrested for walking home. I got laughed at by a judge while trying to say I did not do anything, and no one said anything, except my mom." His fingers tightened around the sketch pad. "I thought I was small, but she showed me I am not." He held up the drawing. Everyone in the room leaned forward. "This is what it looked like," he said. "This is how it felt." The room fell silent. A commissioner wiped at her eye. The report went public the next week. The findings were clear. Racial bias was embedded into the court's handling of juvenile cases under Judge Marks. Dozens of rulings were flagged. A formal investigation was launched, and the judge who once ruled with ridicule was now under review. Meanwhile, Lena was offered spotlight, interviews, panels, morning shows. She took only one, a small podcast hosted by a black educator in Baltimore, focused on amplifying unheard voices. In the episode, Lena spoke slowly, intimately. "This was never just about my son," she said. "This was about a system that turns children into criminals with the stroke of a pen. My son had evidence. He had a mother who knew the law. But what about the ones who have neither?" The host asked, "What would you say to that judge now?" Lena paused. "I would not say anything," she said softly. "I would hand him my son's drawing." The episode ended with Darius reading the title of his art series aloud. Unseen until heard. The air outside the courthouse felt different. Lena and Darius stepped into the sunlight, and for the first time in days, there was no shouting, no reporters, no questions flying through the air like darts, just stillness. Darius looked up. The sky was soft and blue. He had not noticed the sky in days. He held Lena's hand tightly, not because he was afraid, but because he knew now what it meant to be protected, fully and without condition. They walked to the car in silence. Once inside, Darius let out a long, slow breath. "I thought it would feel like winning," he said, "but it doesn't." Lena looked at him gently. That is because it was never a game. He nodded, eyes distant. Will he go to jail? The judge. She shook her head. No, but he will not sit in that chair again. And now the whole world knows what he did when he thought no one was watching. Darius leaned his head back against the seat, staring at the ceiling. I do not want to think about it anymore. You do not have to, she whispered. Not tonight. That night, back home, Lena made pasta the way Darius liked it. Extra cheese, fresh basil, soft garlic toast on the side. They sat at the kitchen table with the TV off, the windows open and the city murmuring in the distance. After dinner, Darius disappeared into his room. Lena let him be, but later, when she passed by his door, she noticed something new. Music playing low and the soft scratch of pencil against paper. She peeked in. Darius was at his desk, sketching again. Not darkness, not pain. This time, it was a group of kids, each one different. One in a hoodie, one in a suit, one with their fists in the air, one looking up at the sky. Above them, Lena recognized a lettering, blocky and imperfect, but bold. We see you now. Lena's chest tightened. She stepped in slowly, kneeling beside him. These are beautiful, she whispered. They're not done, he said, shrugging. I want to make it a whole book. Each page a story. She smiled. You will. He looked at her, serious now. Do you think people will care? Lena took a breath. She thought of every silent courtroom, every child with no voice, every mother who never got there in time. They will, she said, because you made them listen. The next morning, Darius returned to school. No cameras, no statements, just his backpack and his sketch pad. And when he stepped into that hallway, something was different. The same security guard who once ignored him gave a small nod. His teacher smiled, too long to be casual. And one student, someone he barely knew, said, Hey, that was brave. What you did. Darius nodded quietly, then slipped into a seat. He opened his sketchbook, not to escape anymore, but to remember that he had a story to tell. And now, people were finally ready to hear it. It was late. The lights in the apartment were dim, the hum of traffic distant and calm. Lena stood at the kitchen counter, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. She was tired, but the kind of tired that meant something had been finished. From down the hall, Darius's bedroom door creaked open. He stepped out, sketchpad in hand. You still awake? He asked. She turned and smiled. Always. He came over, hesitating for a moment before holding out the sketchpad. Can I show you something? She nodded and sat down at the table. The same table where they had once gone over spelling tests and scholarship letters and unopened bills. Now it held something else. Darius flipped to the final page. It was her, standing in the courtroom, not as he had seen her that day, but how he remembered her now. Radiant, eyes like shields, arms steady as stone. Behind her, flames curled upward, not burning her, but lifting her. And beside her, drawn slightly smaller but standing just as tall, was him. She covered her mouth with her hand, blinking fast. I did not know you saw me like this, she whispered. I always did, he said. I just did not know how to draw it until now. Lena touched the page gently. What is it called? Darius looked at her, unseen until heard. She closed the sketchpad and pulled him into her arms. He rested his head on her shoulder, the way he had when he was little and scared of thunder. I never wanted you to have to see the world like that, she said. Not this young. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. But now I see it, and now I can speak. She nodded, voice thick. You always could. They just did not want to listen. Outside, the sky began to turn. The very first hint of morning. Darius looked toward the window. Do you think anything really changed? Lena smiled softly. Maybe not everything, but you did. He thought about that, then nodded. The screen fades slowly to black as Lena's voice echoes. There are thousands of boys like mine. Quiet, brilliant, unseen, until one day someone listens, and they are never invisible again. A final line fades onto the screen. What would justice look like if every mother had a courtroom to walk into? Fade out.